Sandy Says Read. Welcome back to the channel, you guys. Today we're going to do a quick review of All That Waits in the Night by Patrick Lemarr. Before we begin, I wanted to tell you that at Imaginarium 2022, last July, I picked up this little chapbook at his booth. I won it spinning a wheel of fortune kind of thing, and won this little chapbook. It's called Squiggles in Indigo. It has just a couple of short stories, some poetry to kind of introduce someone to Patrick's writing. I thought it was a clever marketing idea. And while I was at his booth, I also picked up All That Waits in the Night. This book is 13 short stories in the horror genre. It is, got my notes here, 252 pages. It's from Right Crowd Publishing, and this was published in 2022. Let's see, I told you there's 13 stories in here, which, of course, 13, because it's horror. 13 is the perfect number for that. And Patrick explains in the introduction to this that he's put the stories sort of out of order of when they were written. They're not sequential. And that works. I think that works because the different characters that we're introduced to in each story, they do have a common thread. Or at least the stories themselves do have a common thread. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to tell you what that thread is, but there is an underlying element of evil happening. I'll let you read the stories. I'll let you find that for yourself. But yeah, there's some stuff going on. There's also an author. Of course, right? There's an author, Patrick. There's an author of the stories who is a main character in a couple of the stories in the book. His name is Gentry, and poor Gentry, he's kind of down on his luck and not doing very well with the writing. He's got some writer's block, so his wife gifts him a pen. And that is one of the things I wanted to talk about in this review, the magic pen idea, that concept. There's nothing new under the sun. When I was a little girl, I read a story about a little girl who was gifted an ink pen. And with that pen, she could draw things that came to life, that became real. And I want to find that story again. I don't know where. I've looked on YouTube. I've done some searches, online. And what I've found is in the past couple of years, there is a children's book, a poetry book that follows that concept, and there's at least two children's poetry books that follow that concept of a young person getting a paintbrush gifted to them, and when they paint with the paintbrush, it brings things to life, and they're able to create good things for their neighbors, for poor people. But when an emperor wants them to do things, they won't make things for the rich emperor. And so there's a good moral to the story in the little children's book story. That's not the one I'm looking for. Those two variations on the theme, they're not the ones I'm looking for. So I'm putting it out there into the universe. I'm letting you guys out there in the internet land help me find that original story that I'm looking for. I remember it as a young girl was gifted an ink pen. And with that ink pen, she could draw things that made things come to life. And she had difficulty convincing people that it was the pen making this happen. Gentry and his wife have difficulty convincing one another that, yeah, it's this pen making this happen. And you know how I like to give you guys a little snippet? I like to read just a little example from these for you guys to let you get a flavor of the author's writing. And that's the snippet I want to read for you, is where Gentry he's gonna try this out. He's finally decided, okay, we got to check and see if this is really happening, if this pen is really causing things to happen in the world. So he's taken the ink pen, the problematic ink pen, and he's written something down, and now he's going to try it with a different pen. He then pulled the bottle of ink from his drawer and searched for a suitable writing instrument. In a box near the bottom of his filing cabinet, he found a glass dip pen, a gift given to him long ago by an artist friend. He hadn't enjoyed writing with it, but it had seemed rude to re-gift it. Thus it sat unused until Gentry found a sudden need to prove to himself the supernatural did not, in fact, exist. So he's willing to try this out. He's willing to test it, but he's not believing it yet. And it's boy, when he starts to believe it, it's well done. I applaud Patrick for the way he took Gentry on a ride. I'm not going to tell you what happens to Gentry. That was shocking, but it's horror. It's horror. All 13 stories are horror. So there you go. I think that's all I'm going to tell you, because each story has its own little twist, and so each one I could spoil for you if I told you too much. So I don't want to tell you too much. Just rest assured, it's horror. All That Waits in the Night by Patrick Lemarr I can recommend as 13 short stories in the horror genre for you to read. Is that all? All right, thumbs up, because the horror genre is horrifying. It's all random here, so you got to click that bell notification so you'll be notified each time I do something. Thanks for tuning in, you guys.